Hi, today I'm going to be building the combo number 2 kit. I'm going to give you a quick instruction seminar here. See if we can get all these parts put together, build one of these. Nice little kit. So let's get started. I've already opened some of the bags. Got the kit here, a bunch of fiberglass parts. Got our tools up here. The kit comes with all the hardware that you need. So we're going to start with this first. We've got two that are the exact same. Pick whichever one you want. You can use Loctite. I don't usually, but if you want to, you can. You'll notice that there's two different screws. There's a long screw and a short screw that come with the kit. We'll take the shorter screws, pick a plate, can be either of the two, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the posts in like this. So the front holes go a little further back. There's a couple of holes. We'll do that real quick here. And so, if you look, you'll notice the board will sit, the arrow facing forward, right in the middle like so. So now we're going to tighten those down. And don't go too tight on them, just make them nice and snug. Alright, now that that's done, I'm going to kind of move these pieces out of the way here. And I'm going to start on my ESC soldering. Now that my solder iron is hot, this is going to come with a XT60 connector, some thicker shrink and some smaller, thinner shrink. These small ones you want to cut into thirds. These are going to be used between the motor and the ESC. And now we've got those. Find our ESCs. The combo kit number 1 comes with bullet connectors pre-soldered to the ESCs. Combo kit number 2 does not. So we have to solder everything together. Some people like to use a power distribution board. I don't. Not on these little 250 size because they're so small. There's not a lot of room to put the board, and I've seen a lot of times where the boards will actually arc, touch the frame, and blow everything up. So we're just going to solder everything together. Here we've got all of our power wires that we're going to put together. We're going to have 2 in the front for the 2 front motors and 2 in the back. And then of course your power wire also coming off the back with your JST connector. So we're going to solder all that together. I'm going to add one more thing. I want to be able to run a camera on this, so I need to add a JST connector, which does not come with the kit. So I'm back and ready to solder. Got my JST here. I'm going to set up these helping hands to hopefully help us to do this soldering job. And I'm not sure of the easiest way to do this, so We need to take half of this though. Half of this will be on this joint, half on the XT60. So we'll go, let's solder this XT60 in place first. And ensure that you have the right end. So positive is positive, negative is negative. Sometimes there's a seam through the negative that makes it look positive. Be careful with that. So we're going to go ahead and grab some solder, soldering iron. I just like to pull it up. These are pre-tinned. Looks like I'm going to add some more tin to that though. Get it to melt. Melts in place, let it sit. Done. Probably not supposed to touch that with the tip, but it sure makes it a lot faster when you do. Alright. Power wire's done. Now I'm going to slide this over. Let's see, do negative first. Slide this over the negative ends. We'll have another negative end right here. And we'll clamp that. Now, I'm going to go with the negative side here. Try to get these all to match up so that we can solder them. So I've done my best to get all these wires all together here so that they're all touching. Now I'm just going to solder them together. As you can see, as I solder them together, they come back apart. So I'm going to use some pliers here. This is definitely the most difficult part of this build. There's other ways to do this, like adding bullet connectors to this. I found this makes this process a little easier. But just ensure that you have all the wires together. As long as they're all touching, got yourself a solder ball. You can now slide your heat shrink up over the top. They also make clamps for this. A clamp would probably be the easiest way to go. Clamp all these wires together and you're done. Now we'll continue to do the same with the red wires. So I got all the red wires lined up and ready to solder. Now hopefully this will still slide over the top of that. Let it cool for just a second. And Shriek that, make sure there's no wire showing. And what do you know? Wire popped through. So for this, I'm going to use a little bit of electric tape. Go over the top of that because I don't want that to ground with anything. That will keep it from grounding with anything. So there we go. Our ESCs are ready to be installed into our frame. So at this point, what I like to do is take my arms, determine which side I want the top, and install my motors. The reason I'm putting these on now is so that I have something to hold on to while I'm soldering. It just keeps the motors right side up as I'm soldering those to the speed controls. So here we go. You'll notice that there are silver tops and black tops. So the silver motors are going to be your counterclockwise motors. The blacks will be your clockwise motors. And we put them across from each other is how they'll be referenced. So we'll go ahead and put these motors on. I like to keep the wires going with the frame arms. These screws don't come with any washers, which is unfortunate because they're very small-headed screws. So if you over-tighten them, they will bore into the arms. And once they're all on, just make sure it looks centered and tighten them down. But again, not too tight because it will bore into the arm. Okay, got all of our motors on, ready to go. We've got 3 wires here. Speed controls also have 3 wires, but you'll notice that they're not marked. So how do we know which wire goes where? Really, we don't. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to solder them all up. I'm only going to heat shrink one of them though. I'm just going to lay the heat shrink on the others. And then that way when we go into clean flight, we'll check the direction of the motors. If they're spinning the wrong way, then we'll come back over, we'll desolder 2 of them and put them all back together. Now you could, at this point, determine which motors are spinning the wrong way, but I figure I'll do all that with the clean flight software. So we're going to go ahead and solder all these together. Use your shrink that you've cut into thirds. Go ahead and slide those over the ends. Grab your solder. Now at this point you can use your little helping hands to help you out. Just want to tin those real quick. Lay it overlapping. And there you go. There's one. There's 2. And that will be number 3. So now what I do is I'm going to slide one of these up. I'm going to go ahead and shrink that one because one of the 3 is right. We know that, and it's going to be that one. The others I'll just leave. And we'll continue to do that on all the rest of the arms. Make sure that the ESCs that you're soldering are somewhat lined up, because what we're going to be doing is putting the frame together like so once this is done. So I'll go ahead and solder those and get back to it. Okay, so I got the motor soldered up. I have heat shrank one of each, and now we're going to put it into the quad frame. So this is the bottom piece, which will sandwich the 2 arms, and we'll want to run our wires in that sandwich. Keep them out of the way. So we'll just go ahead and we'll use these long screws up through the bottom. I like to put the flat head on the bottom because then when I'm skidding on the ground, it doesn't stop your quad. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this arm on, and we'll do this one too. Put a couple of those long screws in there. Throw that arm on. What's going to happen with these speed controls is they're going to be wrapped. The wires are going to coil up underneath them, and they're going to sit here on the arms. So we're not too concerned about those right now. Just want to basically figure out where all of our wires are going to go. So the board's going to sit here in the center. We're going to want our ESC wires to come up through so that they can easily be plugged into the board. I also like my power wire to come up through that same slot. And you can do this however you'd like. You don't need a power wire coming up through here, but I like it. Probably should put it in first, now that I got all the other ones in the way. I like it to sit right out the back, like so. And then there's another power wire. Normally I'll bring that one up through here so that it can power the camera in the front, or even through the very front hole there. You just have to remember your camera is going to be sitting right here, so if you're flying FPV, that is. So once that's done, try to find these screws. There's a couple there, there's a couple there. I just put a couple of these nuts on, just real light. These are lock nuts. So I got the nylon insert. Because I still want to be able to move this around, and it looks like I got that in the wrong holes. Nice work. There you go. Just want to make sure that the speed control will sit on the arm. Don't want to pull too much wire through that it can't sit on the arm. And that's the wire I don't want to pull. And be careful not to rip these wires out. So, let's make sure they're aligned under here. I'm pushing the power wires all forward so that that will sit out on the arm like it's supposed to. That's out on the arm like it's supposed to. Take a little slack out of that, and we should be good right there with the back, with the front. With the back, we'll do the same thing. We're going to take these long screws, and last but not least, and what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the motor wires stay in front of the arms I want everything up in this area here. And there we go. Next step is going to be to hot glue or use double-sided sticky tape to put your control board in place. And right now I'm going to heat up my hot glue gun. So as the hot glue gun was heating up, I went ahead and added the rest of the screws and the lock washers to the build and tightened it all down, so nice and tight now. Next step, you're going to want to find the arrow which points to the front on this board. This is the CC3D. We're going to use the Open Pilot to program this, and because I don't have any double-sided sticky tape, I'm going to use hot glue. So here we go with the hot glue. Going to get an idea of where this thing sits. It's right around here, and here, here, and here. So I'll gob some on there. Before it cools, just put this board on there. Try to make it straight and in the center of the quad. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to wipe off any excess that I can see. Don't need the added weight. And there we go. So now we're going to take a guess at which motor is where, and we'll be able to tell when we set this up which motor it actually is. But this one definitely looks like number 4. So I'll wind this up, make sure you get the polarity right. The negative is to the outside of the board. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is number 3. I can see it coming through, so I know that's 3. So the next thing we're going to do is going to plug in the wires from the CC3D to the receiver, and you'll notice there's a lot of wires on this, but you'll also notice that only one has the ground, signal, and power wire. So I'm going to use that one. I'm going to plug it in channel 1. Make sure that you do plug it in the correct way. Signal positive, negative on this particular receiver. And then the rest of these wires is a 6-channel receiver, so I'm just going to start plugging all 6 of them in, making sure that, as you can see there, the signal wire lines up with the signal wire here. And now we're ready to plug it in to the CC3D board. It's plugged in and ready to rock. So now normally what I would do, I like to twist these up, keep them out of the way. I hot glue this right there to my case, and it's in a nice position. So I'll just leave it there for now. We're going to be going and hooking this up now to the computer. So I want to know if I soldered my joints correctly in the correct orientation. I'm going to take some electric tape and put it on the motors just over the nuts there, so that when this motor spins, it's easier to tell which direction that motor is going to be spinning. So I'm going to do that to all 4 of them. We're at the computer now. We're going to hook this board up, do the programming on it. You're going to want to install the Open Pilot software. I'll add a link to it down in the description of this video. So once you get that downloaded, we'll bring up our desktop and Open Pilot GCS. While we're opening that, got the USB, came with the board, and I'll go ahead and plug that in. Board's lighting up, lots of colors, and here it comes. Alright, so If the drivers weren't installed, they would be installing right now. But since they're already installed, we're going to go ahead and go with this next step, which is the vehicle setup wizard. Now, if for some reason your drivers don't install the first time, close this program and reopen it, and sometimes that helps. So here we go. I'm just going to walk through this whole wizard. It says make sure that your props are removed. Say OK. We're going to go ahead and upgrade. This will erase the board and set it up with the new firmware. And if for some reason this doesn't go all the way through, I found that one time I didn't have the USB plugged into the board all the way, so it acted like it was doing half of this, but it couldn't finish the job. So if you're having problems, double check, make sure that you're plugged all the way into the board. Hit next. It's telling us what our device is, so go ahead and hit next. I have mine run through the PWM, so I'm going to go with that. Next. Multi-rotor, yes. Configuration X, yes. Motor 1, 2, 3, and 4, yes. I leave it on the rapid ESC, next. And next again. And it's going to calibrate. Hit next and make sure your battery is unplugged, which it is. So in this step we need to mark these boxes and then hit start. Once those are marked, now it's going to ask us to plug our battery in. We just noted our low, and now with the battery plugged in we can now mark our high. So we'll go ahead and hit stop. Low and high have been marked. You can see it's doing something there, and we can go into the next. Make sure that your props are removed. Next. So here we're going to test our motors. We're also going to check to make sure that they're rotating the proper direction. We'll go ahead and hit start for this motor and bring it up. I want to make sure that while we're doing this, none of those bare wires are touching, and also that the wires are out of the way of the motor when it starts to spin. So as I'm dragging this up, there it started. And checking to make sure that it's rotating correctly, and it is. So I'm going to hit stop. And that motor is set. We're going to go to the next motor. So now motor number 2, make sure that the wires are out of the way and that they're not touching. Go ahead and hit start and do the same thing. Bring it up to, the other one was at 1118. So we've got this one at the same. And checking the rotation of the motor, that one is also correct. So it's turning the correct way. 2 for 2. Go to the next. This motor number 3, which is this one here. Get this cord out of the way. And the shorter the tape, probably the better on these. You just need enough to give you an indication of what direction it's turning. So here we go. I'm going to hit start here and take that up to 18, and it too is spinning the correct way. And here we go on the last motor. I'm going to go ahead and hit start and bring this up. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to go to about 116 and it'll start, and 118 it runs fairly well, pretty consistent. So it's rotating this direction, which is also the correct direction. 4 out of 4, not bad. Now had any of these motors not turned the right direction, we would have marked them and we would have gone back and resoldered them. So we would have switched the 2 wires so that this wire was plugged into this one plugged into that, and that would have changed the rotation of the motor. But in this case we don't need to do that, so we're perfect. Now we can heat shrink these on to where they need to be. But for now we're going to finish the calibration of the board. So we're going to hit next. From this menu you can see this is an initial tuning menu. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there are 3 ZMRs currently here. There'll probably be more in the future. The first ZMR is for a 4S battery. The second one is for a 3S, and the third one is also for a 4S. So I'm picking the second one that's for a 3S, and this is a pretty dang close tuning for this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. It's flashing the board, restarting the board, and we're ready for the transmitter setup. So we'll go ahead and hit transmitter setup. We'll hit OK and next. So here we are with the transmitter, which I will now turn on. Got the transmitter in front of me. So in this menu it's telling me to move my sticks around. So I'm going to go ahead and move my throttle as it's indicating, and it registered it. Now it's telling me move left and right. So left, up and down, and rudder right. And now it's telling me to move my flight mode switch. So I'll go ahead and move that. Now with this FlySky radio, you do have to change the settings in it in order to get that flight mode switch to register, and it's pretty easily done. So now it's asking for other switches along the radio. You can move them if you want, if you have it set up. I don't, so I'm going to hit skip and skip and skip. And now what it's going to do is ask you to center all your sticks. So I move the throttle to the center, I make sure that the flight mode is in the center, which it is, and I'm going to hit next. Now it's telling you to move all your sticks around to make sure that you get the full range. So I didn't have any of these others set up in there, but I move them anyway. So now I'm back to the center position, and I'll hit next. At this point it wants to make sure that all your channels are going the correct direction. So if you move your throttle up, it moves up, down it moves down, left is left and right is right. Now with your elevator, pull back. As you can see, my elevator, or the pitch in this case, actually goes the opposite direction. So I go up to pitch, select that, and it reverses it. Done with that step, I hit next. And it says you've completed the wizard. And I go ahead and hit save at this point down in the bottom right hand corner, and next. Okay, the arming step. This is how the board is going to arm. If you go and play with the stick and go up and down, it's not going to do anything. The motors will just sit there, you'll think it's dead. Now you need to go in here and tell it how you want it to arm. I like to go with the yaw to the right. So that's my yaw stick to the right, and if I hold it to the right, it will start the aircraft. The blades will start turning. The arming timeout, I don't know if you can see this, but it's set at 30 seconds. That seems like a long time to me. I can get a lot of fingers in there in 30 seconds. I'm going to take that down to, let's go 10 seconds. And I'll go ahead and hit save in the lower right hand corner, and that should have saved everything to the board. And at this point you're ready to fly. You can go through and look at all the other settings that are in here if you'd like, and tweak other things, but I've found that at this point it's pretty much ready to go, and you can go out and fly it just like this, no other adjustments. So what we'll do now is we'll go back to the workbench. I'll heat shrink and also attach the speed controls to the arms, and once that is done, put some props on, put the top plate on and a battery, and it's ready to fly. Back at the workbench now, I'm going to go ahead and heat shrink since we didn't need to do any soldering, which by the way is the first time ever that all of those have been, where they're supposed to be. Normally you have a couple of them that are going the wrong direction and you need to desolder and resolder. I should probably go to Vegas. Pretty lucky. So remove the tape from the motors. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure not to bend where the solder joint is, because it will weaken it. When you solder it, it makes it hard. It's not very flexible. So by bending it will actually break the solder. You want to make sure that none of these wires are going to touch anything. Okay, now that those are all soldered into place, we're going to go ahead and put these speed controls where they're going to sit. So again, I don't want to bend the wires where I've just soldered them. And you're going to need some zip ties to do this, not included in the kit. Hopefully it's something you got sitting around the house already. Next thing we're going to do is put the props on. So the rotation of this motor is counterclockwise. So we'll start there, unwind, put it on. You want to make sure that you have the numbers on the top, not the bottom. So you want to make sure that the props are the opposites. So this prop being the same as this prop. Got a silver nut and a silver nut. Make sure those props are turning the right direction. I'm just going to hand tighten these for now. I have a little screwdriver I like to use to tighten these down with. Put it through the center, tighten it. I don't over tighten it, just make it snug. And now we can put the top on. Before we do that though, you have your Mobius plate with these rubber dampeners, vibration dampeners. Put those on. There's that. Camera mount goes right there like so, and into here. Then use the screws provided to anchor the top down. ready to go. You can put the landing gear on if you'd like. They go on just like this. I don't like to use them, but that's how they would go on. You basically put it over the side and then you have to pry it over and then slide it up. Okay, it's time for our test flight. I'm going to use a battery strap. You could also use Velcro, which is not included with the kit, but buy a battery strap or Velcro. Got my radio on. I'm going to plug this in. And strap the battery on there nice and tight. You want to make sure that nothing gets in front of those motors, the props. They will cut it. So, there's a little bit of play there. And that battery strap is not really tight. I personally use Velcro and a battery strap to hold these on. But for the quick demo here, we'll just battery strap it. Alright, so to arm it, we're going to go all the way to the right, lower right hand corner, and then after 3 seconds throttle it up. You see the motors come online. You can see it's extremely stable. So hands off. But yet extremely maneuverable too. There you go.